I'm Captain Hoff, CEO of Founderspace, the leading global startup accelerator. I'm also author of the award-winning books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, and The 5 Forces. Biohackers. Welcome to the strange and odd world of biohacking. I am going to take you deep, and I'm going to show you what's going on around the world today. Most people don't realize it, but there is a vibrant subculture for biohacking. People who want to go out and experiment with biology. And there are communities of these biohackers sprouting up online and all over the world in universities, dorm rooms, garages, laboratories, getting together to run these experiments. How many biohackers are there? Well, it depends how you define biohacking. If you define it narrowly as people doing extreme experiments, the number is probably in the tens of thousands. However, if you expand that definition to people who take herbal supplements, people who take vitamins, people who experiment with their sleep and things like that, well, the number is huge. It includes maybe a majority of the people on the planet today experiment in one way or another with their bodies. So what is biohacking? That's what we have to ask. Well, there are many, many different types of biohacking. The most basic form of biohacking is when you do something to improve, for example, your health or your performance as an athlete. People are always trying different vitamins and supplements and things like that, different nutritional things to improve themselves. But where we're going to go is a more interesting subculture of biohacking. And that is where people are actually using the advanced scientific tools available today, like CRISPR, DNA editing, like implanting chips in their bodies to alter their performance. This is where it gets really interesting and actually a little bit scary. But we shouldn't be too afraid of biohacking, because biohacking has been around, I believe, since human beings started experimenting with what they ate. When they would find berries in the forest, they would experiment and see if those berries made them feel better, if they made them feel dizzy, if they were poisonous, and different herbs. This has been going on forever, and it's continuing today. The big difference now is that we have a lot more technology to play with. And with that technology comes dangers and responsibilities. Pacemakers. Most of us are familiar with the idea of pacemakers. Now, pacemakers, if you think about it, is a pretty extreme form of biohacking. We're actually taking electronics and implanting them in our bodies to control one of our most vital organs, our heart. Pacemakers can help people and save lives when they have irregular heartbeats that could lead to a heart attack. Now, what pacemakers do is they can smooth out the heartbeats. They can change the rhythm. They can slow it down. They can speed it up. They can control different parts of the heart. It's amazing technology. And today, hundreds of thousands of people every year get pacemakers, and millions of people already have them implanted. So this is a pretty common practice. Yet, it is biohacking. It is fundamentally changing our biology, putting electronics, our most advanced technology, to use actually in our organs. And honestly, this is just the beginning. But what separates this from what we call biohacking is the type of people that do it. When you get a pacemaker, you usually go to a hospital and you have a professional surgeon make the implant. Well, the type of biohacking that we're going to be discussing is where people don't do the standard thing. They don't go to professionals. They don't take proven science. They take it into their own hands to hack themselves. And that's what I refer to, and that's what people call these biohacking communities. Deep brain implants. This is another form of biohacking that is still done by the medical establishment, but it's a little more extreme and a little more experimental than a pacemaker. First of all, for a deep brain implant, you actually have to have holes drilled in your skull and electrodes implanted into your brain. Now, for most people, that's a scary thought, but they have found that deep brain implants can actually yield a number of benefits. First of all, they have used deep brain implants successfully to treat tremors when people are shaking in Parkinson's disease. They have also used it to treat obsessive compulsive disorder. And they are experimenting now in a number of different areas. For example, deep brain implants can actually relieve depression. They can actually help patients suffering from dementia. And they have multiple other applications for these implants. It's kind of like a miracle cure. But like a lot of miracle cures, they don't really understand how deep brain implants works. And that is because we don't really understand how our brains work. Our brains are a mystery, even to neuroscientists. We are just beginning to understand this. So it's a risky operation. It's on kind of the cutting edge of science. And just because a deep brain implant may benefit you doesn't mean you should get it, because sticking electrodes in your head can have a lot of other ramifications. There could be a lot of things that go wrong, and you never know. It might not work. RFID and NFC chips. So a lot of people around the world are starting to experiment with implanting chips into their bodies. But this is the real biohackers, because they aren't going to a hospital. They aren't even going to a professional. A lot of them are doing it themselves, or they're going to some sort of friend who's figured out how to do it. Now, for a tiny chip to implant it under your skin isn't too difficult. So this type of surgery, it's invasive, but the risks are minimal. What people are doing is they are implanting these little chips in their skin as a way for them to gain benefits. And you have to ask yourself, are the benefits worth it? Well, here are some of the benefits that you can do if you have an RFID or NFC chip implanted in you. Number one, in Scandinavia, people are using these to get on subways. So the subway system is set up so that if you have a little chip implanted in you, you can actually get on the subway. Other people are using them for security in their office, their home office, or an office building where they could get through a security door because they have the chip implanted in them. Could they use a card on the subway or the door? Absolutely. But they think it's cool to have the chip implanted in them. First of all, they never have to remember to bring it along with them, and they can never lose it and nobody can steal it because it's literally part of their body. It's attached to them. So those are some advantages. People are using them to, for their computer security. So when they open their laptop, they know who it is, and it automatically unlocks. All sorts of things you can imagine. At one company, they've actually set up vending machines where if you have an RFID chip, you can go to the vending machine, press a button, get your drink or your snack, and it will automatically be debited from your account. So there are all these different ways to use them, but there's also controversy because in the UK, they're actually worried that companies will start encouraging or strongly encouraging their employees to get these chips in order to track them, in order to enhance security within the companies. And there is actually a debate right now over laws to be passed restricting companies from mandating that employees get chips implanted in them. Now, we're still a bit of a ways off from that, and it's mostly theoretical, these arguments, because most companies don't do it and most people honestly don't want it. However, in the future, as chips proliferate, as more and more people get chips for medical conditions, get chips, maybe even brain chips for communication, all of these things, then this type of debate will become very relevant to our future society. North Sense. This is a biohack that comes from the startup Cyborg's Nest. They have actually invented a little device that you can anchor into your chest, and whenever you turn to face the direction north, it vibrates. So in essence, you have a body compass. So all the time as you maneuver, as you walk through a forest or walk down a city street and round a corner, you get a sense for where true north actually is. Now, it's kind of a cool idea. What it does is it turns people into birds or other creatures, other animals that actually have this sort of compass built into their bodies. So there are many animals that actually have a sense and guide themselves with an internal compass. And this allows human beings to simulate that experience. So is it practical? Well, not really, since all of us have GPS on our phone. We could just use our phone to get anywhere. We don't really need it. But it's a very interesting experiment. Now, there are some complications here because the body could reject the implant and people may have to take it out. And there are other complications because to actually implant this sensor into your chest, the anchors for it is a surgical procedure and it could become infected. Other things could go wrong. But this hasn't stopped Cyborg's Nest. They are actually very passionate about this product and they are shipping hundreds of these units every year to customers around the world, these biohackers who want to experiment on themselves. Magnetic fingers. This is one of the most popular biohacks out there. So what people will do is they will perform surgery on themselves or have a friend do it and actually cut a tiny slit in their fingers and stick in a little rare earth magnet and then sew it up. Why would they do this? Well, what it does, it allows them to sense magnetic fields. So as they walk around, wherever they have a magnet implanted, it begins to tingle. So they can actually feel the magnetic waves. You could approach, for example, a stereo speaker, and your fingers, if it's on, will start to tingle the closer you get. The same with a hard drive. You could wipe a hotel card clean, a magnetic card. You could erase it just with your fingers. You could do all sorts of little things. But the most important thing is, it's a different experience. It becomes like a sixth sense. So we have 5 senses that we rely on every day. They form our Umwelt, our experience of the world. Our eyes, our ears, our taste, our skin, our touch. These senses are what inform us about reality. But there's a lot of reality out there that we're just oblivious to. For example, magnetic fields. We don't even know if we're walking through a magnetic field. Walking near a generator or near a power line, we're just oblivious unless we see it, but we don't feel it. Now, with these magnets, you actually will feel the magnetic fields you pass through, creating a whole nother sensory experience, expanding our Umwelt, expanding our awareness of the world around us. And people have done this. A lot of them rave about it. They think it's so cool that it was definitely worth the minor surgery to get it done. However, you have to keep in mind that there are some downsides. Number one, these little magnets don't stay magnetized forever. They actually lose their magnetic charge over time. So after about 4 years, you need a replacement because the signal gets pretty weak and eventually dies off altogether. Another problem is that if you go into a hospital to get an MRI, you actually have to have your magnets removed. They won't perform the MRI, with your magnet implanted in your body because it causes interference. So keep that in mind if you're going to go out and biohack yourself with magnets. Seismic sensors. Moon Ribas is an artist from Catalan, and she's an avant-garde artist. And as part of her art, she has actually biohacked herself. In her case, she implanted sensors, seismic sensors that can sense earthquakes around the world in her feet. So as she performs these dances, these artistic dances, she can dance to the beat of the earth actually shaking. That's what she does. And she even takes these seismic signals and translates them into sound so that she can, with her partners, can create music that reflects the earthquakes taking place around the world. So, and our audience can hear this and get a sense for it, but they can't do what she does, which she actually feels those vibrations coursing through her legs as she moves her legs, and they inform her art, they inform her dance. Now, she is very passionate about this. She has even hooked up those seismic sensors to replicate earthquakes on the moon, so she can dance according to the moon's seismic vibrations. Now, she's passionate. She's so passionate about cyborg art that she is one of the founders of the Cyborg Foundation, which actually goes out there to defend cyborg rights and promote people who want to become cyborgs. She feels that we have an opportunity right now to become sensoronauts, like astronauts of sense, where we create new sensory experiences as we embed technology into our body that allows us to perceive things we currently are unable to perceive. Feeling color. What if you could feel color? Not just see it, but actually feel it. Neil Harbinson has achieved this by attaching an insect-like antenna to his skull. He uses this antenna to actually sense what different colors are. So the antenna translates the color it is pointed at into vibrations. So under his hair, there is a strap that actually vibrates at different frequencies depending on the color he looks at. Purple, blue, red, yellow, each vibrate his skull at different frequencies. So as he walks around the world, through a forest, looks at a flower, a red flower, that color starts to translate into sensations that his body feels. Now, the interesting thing is, Neil Harbinson is colorblind. So a lot of these colors look just like different shades of gray. And he couldn't experience it like you or I would who aren't colorblind. So he really wanted to get a sense for what these colors are. And that is what prompted him to take this leap. And he has become a renowned cyber artist. He lives in New York, and he actually travels around giving performances and trying to explain to people what it's like to have an additional sense of the world around you. He has even earned distinction as the first cyborg to be legally recognized by a government. He actually has his passport from the UK with the picture taken with the antenna. He insisted on this. He said, I am a cyborg and I will not remove my antenna. If you want me to give me a passport, you have to use a picture of me as I am. This is my right. So you can imagine he's a character and he's out there performing a task of showing us what is possible when we extend the sensory experiences that we can have by altering, in effect, biohacking ourselves. Decorative biohacking. There are groups out there right now that are biohacking themselves just for the looks of it. So there's one in Pittsburgh called Grindhouse Wetware, and they have been inserting these LEDs subdermally below the skin, and they basically glow and they can blink on and off in different patterns. So it looks really cool and a little bit freaky, but this type of biohacking may be the future. I mean, who knows what fashion will dictate, but 10, 20 years from now, when it's not so uncomfortable to have surgery like this and insert these LEDs and other materials into your body, people may do it. I mean, people get plastic surgery today. People get piercings. All of these things, this has been going on not just recently, but it dates back thousands of years. Tribes have altered the body, flattened the forehead, elongated the neck, tattoos. These are all things that have been around hundreds and hundreds of years, modifying our body for beauty because we thought it was interesting, because it became the fashion, because it's part of our culture. Well, now this has been extended through biohackers using new technologies. E-tattoos, these electronic tattoos you can put on you, they're a painless, simple way to biohack your body. You could go to extremes where you actually have this home done surgery and these homemade devices implanted in you. And honestly, this is just the beginning. I predict, the punk rockers of the future, the young people of the future, they won't be satisfied with a nose ring or even nipple rings and piercings all over their body. They'll want technological equivalents. And this is what could be coming. This decorative biohacking. DIY cyborgs. Now, this is where biohacking really gets extreme. Tim Cannon is one of the founders of Grindhouse Wetware. And not only is he putting little LEDs under the skin, but he's putting larger objects. He's putting objects the size of a deck of cards into his arm and surgically stitching them in there so that they can collect biometric data like his heartbeat, his pulse, and other things. He did this and he kept this device in his arm for several months, and eventually he removed it. I guess it got uncomfortable. But you imagine the risk of infection here is pretty high. In the body, it's not natural for the body. And a lot of the materials they're using would make surgery like this quite risky. It could be, and also these devices will eventually, probably almost in every case, if they're not done by professionals, be rejected by the body at some point and have to be removed. The swelling and other problems. So be cautious if you're going to do this at home. But Tim Cannon, he doesn't care. He's a biohacking believer, and he will go all the way. And he's not alone. There's a whole subculture out there implanting devices in there. There's a guy who implanted basically in his leg a hard drive so that he could save movies and digital music and other information in his leg. There's another person who made these kind of indestructible shin protectors that he implanted in the skin under his shin until they burst open. It didn't really fit right. He was using, he wanted something where if he tripped and fell, he wouldn't feel a thing. But eventually these things burst open and he had to remove them. So it's, people are, anything you can actually imagine people doing, somewhere in the world, there's somebody crazy enough to try it. I assure you. Bat sonar. Richard Lee is another one of these extreme biohackers who really is fearless when it comes to this stuff. So in one of his experiments, he decided he wants to echolocate like a bat. So as bats navigate through the world, they actually see by echolocating, by making noise, and the sound waves bounce off the walls, and then they get their brain processes the equivalent of an image of what's around them. How would he do this? He actually has implanted little speakers, vibrators in his ears. And then he has a coil around his neck. So his goal is to reproduce the sensation and the mechanism that bats use to navigate through dark caves. Why would he do this? Well, Richard Lee is actually suffering from a condition that is causing him to lose his eyesight. He is going blind. So for him, this is more than just a fun experiment. He is actually looking for a way that he can see without his eyes. Will it work? Does it work? Well, the jury's still out, but he is trying to perfect this technology. Lovetron 9000. The name says it all. This is another one of Richard Lee's wacky experiments. He just doesn't stop. He has actually implanted a device into his groin that vibrates. So he can be stimulated at various times by this device as he goes about his everyday life. Now, why did he do this? Well, Richard Lee got divorced, and then he met another woman, and he told her this crazy idea, and she said, that is really cool. You should just do it. So he just did it. And not only did he do it, he is actually selling these Lovetron 9,000 devices that you could buy and implant in your groin. So if you're really interested, Google it. He may still be selling them. And you can go around with a next generation biohacking experience that you would never get otherwise. Google Genius takes 100 pills a day. Biohacking isn't just limited to implanting chips and other foreign objects in your body. There are a lot of people biohacking now with new types of medicines and supplements. Now, Ray Kurzweil, he is sort of the father of transhumanism. He's a really smart guy and a director at Google. And this genius, is actually experimenting with himself to prolong his life. He believes by taking the right combination of pills, he can actually live forever. Well, the pills won't keep him alive forever. He knows that. But the pills, he is hoping, will extend his life long enough so that as medical technology and life extension technologies advance, they can actually keep him alive longer and longer and longer. And the longer he lives, the more advanced the technology becomes. Therefore, he has a chance at never dying, at immortality. Yes, the fountain of youth. Do I recommend you go out and take 100 different pills in hopes that it will prolong your life? Honestly, I don't. There are two sides to this. No one knows what these unproven medications actually do and supplements actually do. And beyond that, nobody understands the interactions between them. If you're taking 100 different pills, some of them herbal, some of them, pharmaceutical, and you're combining them, what will that do to your body? It could extend your life, but it could also cause a lot of damage. There have been horror stories that I've read, like with kava and other supplements that could wind up seriously damaging your liver and other vital organisms. Or other ones could cause cancer, or other ones could lead to depression. There's all these side effects that can happen as these drugs intermingle and combine in your body. So you're taking a big chance. But all of these biohackers are taking a chance. That is what they do. There are even people out there who will take other people's blood and you have that intravenously fed into their body. This is called the young blood movement. There's been some research to show that younger people's blood actually restores the body. It can actually extend the life of somebody who is older. So taking blood donations from young people and actually transfusing them into older people can extend their lives. Is this data valid? It's murky right now. People don't know. I've seen reports that, yes, young blood really works. I've seen reports that it's all a sham. The thing doesn't work at all. But honestly, you can go out and sign up for this human vampire program today. It's available. You can Google it, you can find out, and you can, for a hefty price, usually $8,000, maybe more, you can start getting transfusions of young blood, especially if you're older, that supposedly can give you eternal youth. We will see. Chlorine E6 night vision. That's right, you heard it. You someday may be able to see in the dark. And all you need are a few eye drops of chlorine E6. Well, Gabriel Lucena, he tried this. He actually did an experiment. He found that there's a fish that lives in the depths of the ocean, and it can see in almost total darkness because of this chemical in its eye. So he took that chemical and he had it dropped into his own eyes. Now, nobody can verify this for sure, but he claimed, and he has some, documentation to prove it, that in the dark, he could see for a period of time. And of course, eventually this wore off. But again, it's risky. Would you put some strange substance found in a fish in the depths of the ocean into your eye? Could it damage your eye? Could it cause blindness? Could it be, could it lead to infections or other things? Well, the answer is yes. But, he is an extreme biohacker, and he wanted to run this experiment, and he believes it was a big success. Neural interfaces. Kevin Warwick is one of the pioneers of neural interfaces and cyborgs. He is actually known as Captain Cyborg, and he has done many groundbreaking experiments on himself and his family members, as well as his students. He is a professor in the UK at Coventry University. And Kevin is a big believer that we will be merging with our machines. In one of his early experiments, he actually created a wristband that would intercept the signals from his brain to his hand, the movements of his hand. And what he did is he flew all the way to New York, connected this device up to the internet, and then back in England, when he moved his hand, a robotic hand mimicked his movements. And that robotic hand also had sensors. And as it touched things, he could actually take those pulses, put them back into his hand, and actually feel them as if he was touching them. This was the first time this type of experiment had been done. And it really showed that we can combine ourselves with robots even over great distances and actually share sensory information. Now, Kevin Warwick didn't stop there. He went on and convinced his wife to have a chip implanted in her arm. Now, this didn't cause a divorce. It didn't end their marriage. What it actually did was brought them closer together. He says it actually became an intimate experience because whenever she moved her hand, she would send off pulses that would be translated then through the internet. And no matter where he was, he would feel it in his hand. He would feel the same pulses, and he could send pulses to her. So what he did was he joined their nervous system. They basically linked nervous systems so that at all times they were getting a sense of feeling for what the other was feeling and doing. So that's kind of freaky. And Kevin's students, they love him because he is always open to new ideas and allowing them to experiment. But a lot of times it's hard because universities are pretty conservative institutions. And he had, to get these surgeries done, the best people often to do these surgeries are not really licensed. They are like the same type of body artists that do piercings and other things. And, he had to go to the board at the university and ask them, can I have this piercing body artist with this strange name work on our students, modify their bodies? Their natural reaction was no. This could open up huge lawsuits. But somehow Kevin manages to get it passed. He manages to get them to agree. His students have been doing amazing things. Like one of them wanted to have a sense for how far away he was from objects. So the distance between himself and different objects. And as he closed that gap, as he got closer to an object, he could actually feel, without seeing anything, feel the distance contracting, feel himself getting closer through vibrations in his fingers. This, he got permission to actually install these special magnets and sensors in his hands and was able to conduct that experiment and many, many others. So if you would rather become a biohacker in an academic environment, I highly recommend you go to Kevin. He's a great guy, super nice. He just endorsed my new book the 5 forces, which includes all this crazy stuff. And I'm sure if you are studious enough and passionate enough, you can get in his program. Eye camera. How would you like to have a camera in your eye recording everything you see as your eye would see it? Well, Rob Spence decided to do this. Why? Well, first of all, he's blind in one eye. Second, he's a filmmaker. So what he wanted to do was create a film about cyborgs made by a cyborg. So he turned himself into a cyborg. Now, this little camera implanted in his eye, it doesn't connect to his optic nerve. So it doesn't send the signal to his brain like other bionic eyes. But honestly, there are bionic eyes out there now. They are actually developing bionic eyes that connect to your optic nerve and can actually replace your eyeball. And the fidelity of the images is getting higher and higher resolution. So soon you can have pretty clear images fed directly into your brain. But that's not what Rob Spence is doing. He doesn't have the money to do that. He is a biohacker and he's doing it himself. So he has used this camera eye to actually shoot his documentary about cyborgs and using basically his body as the camera. How cool is that? Subdermal implants. These are radical body modifications. And they are being done in this subculture that has blossomed here in the United States and in other countries. So people aren't satisfied with tattoos or piercings. They want to go all the way. They want to transform themselves into characters from Lord of the Rings or Star Wars Cantina. They want horns sprouting from their head. They want a heart-shaped heart implanted in their chest. They want little bumps running all the way up their arms so they look like some alien creature. It is freaky and also kind of cool. You know, if you think about it, a lot of the practices we accept today, like nose rings and other things, those, decades before were considered really, really freaky. But today they're kind of considered, oh, you got a nose ring. Oh, you got a belly button piercing. Oh, people are piercing everything these days. And people are getting tattoos like crazy. And, their entire body's covered with tattoos. So is this what's next? Well, it's one thing to get a tattoo or a piercing. It's another thing to get a body modification. I mean, where do you go to get it? You have to go to a body modification artist. And are these artists licensed? Have they had any formal training? Usually the answer is no. They're definitely not licensed. Nobody licensed them. And formal training is pretty rare. There isn't really a school that teaches this because it's not licensed, because it is illegal. It is essentially a gray area. The authorities, for the most part, unless there's a big complaint, they aren't cracking down on it. But you have to be careful, because if you get one of these modifications, it can lead to a lot of complications. First of all, if it's not an entirely sterile environment, it can become infected. Secondly, the body can reject certain materials. Third, a lot of them are using household implements to conduct these surgeries, like butter knives and things like that, not professional surgical instruments. So why don't you just go to a plastic surgeon? Plastic surgeons do more advanced operations than this all the time, every day. Well, the American Medical Association has actually said that plastic surgeons can only do operations that, quote unquote, society considers normal. Anything that deviates from normal is illegal. They'll lose their license if they do it. So if you go to a plastic surgeon, even if they wanted to do it, they probably won't risk it because it's too big a risk. They don't want to lose their license. So in a way, if you want one of these radical body modifications, if you want to look like an orc, or you want to look like a lizard man, or some weird alien, you must go underground, and you must seek out one of these body modification artists. All I can say is do your homework, check your references, and be prepared to live with whatever happens after you get it done. Nootropics, smart drugs. These are all the rage right now in Silicon Valley. You know, everyone here, all the techies, they want to work all the time. They're so competitive. They're building the next unicorns. They want to be able to stay up late. They want to be able to focus. They want to boost their IQ so they can solve incredibly hard problems in short amounts of time. And they are doing this now by taking drugs. Now, these drugs can be herbal supplements, they can be pharmaceuticals, they can be all sorts of things. Some of them legal, some of them, we don't know, very poorly regulated for sure. And they are taking these in hopes of transforming themselves. I mean, honestly, who wouldn't want to be smarter? Who wouldn't want to be able to concentrate better? That's why so many of us drink coffee and tea. It boosts our mental capabilities for a period of time, and then we have to consume more. So in Silicon Valley, there's one figure that stands out. His name is Dave Asprey, and he is one of the leading proponents of nootropics and all this self-biohacking to improve your performance. Now, Osprey used to weigh 300 pounds, and he was exhausted all the time. Then he started hacking his body with these drugs, and he looks like a triathlete, muscle-bound, thin, and pumped up with energy. And it's hard to say whether the drugs did it or whether it was simply the fact that he went on a better diet and really focused on improving himself. Although he claims that the drugs made an enormous difference. And they have also allowed his cognitive abilities to improve dramatically. In fact, he claims, although there's no real proof to this, that he enhanced his IQ by 20 IQ points after taking smart drugs. And he claims that he has spent over $1 million on this, on improving himself through these biohacking techniques. Now, he has done some pretty amazing stuff. He's a great speaker. He's very experimental. He's not afraid to try anything he recommends on his own body. And one of his war stories is that he'd been struggling to write this book and, hadn't gotten much down on paper. And the publishing date was looming. It kept getting closer and closer and closer. When it was 5 days away, he finally decided he was going to totally boost himself up. So he took all these different drugs, did all these different therapies, and literally wrote the entire manuscript for a book in 5 days. Now that's something. So I don't know how good the book was. Maybe you could go and find it, Google it and read it, and then you can decide for yourself. But the bottom line is a lot of people today are turning to nootropics, smart drugs, to enhance their capabilities in an increasingly competitive world. But you have to beware. These are poorly regulated, if regulated at all. You don't know the interactions. You don't know the effects. You've got to be really careful. A lot of scientists who've looked into this deeply say, you can't discount the placebo effect. If you take a drug believing it will boost your energy, believing it'll make you concentrate better, believing it'll make you smarter, increase your IQ, then a lot of times you will feel like that's happening. And it's called the placebo effect. Basically, your mind gets stimulated and actually that has an effect on your body and on your performance. So you have to be able to separate the placebo effect from what's really happening, and you can only do that in controlled trials. Unfortunately, these guys and what biohackers do in general is they don't wait for controlled trials. They don't wait for the scientific data. They go ahead and experiment on themselves. So if you want to take that risk and perhaps reap the rewards, go ahead. Gene editing. This is the new frontier for biohackers, an irresistible Garden of Eden, because now we have the tools to actually reprogram our genetics, reprogram our bodies, change who and what we are simply by editing our genes. Now, Josiah Zayner is on the forefront of this. He is a young guy. He used to work at NASA, but he felt that job was too boring. And he basically has taught himself how to edit genes. Now, he started with frogs. Frogs, are very simple, and he basically figured out how to edit their genes and enable these frogs to grow muscles more quickly. Now, all of us would love to grow muscles more quickly without having to put all those hours into the gym. And Josiah Zayner, he proved he could do this in frogs, and he started making little kits where people could inject their frogs, and the frogs would wind up as little Arnold Schwarzenegger frogs. Not quite that dramatic, but apparently they could gain muscle mass faster. Well, he took it to the next level. He actually took this knowledge, and then he took gene editing and he injected it into himself so that it would edit his own genes and potentially make himself into a superhuman. There was no medical proof for this. There had been no real data on what would happen if he did this. And the dangers are enormous. Like if you are editing your own genes, you simply don't know what's going to happen. But Josiah Zayner, he believes, and this is his firm belief, he is a political activist. He actually believes very strongly that we, the small guys, shouldn't wait for the big pharmaceutical companies to sell us gene editing technologies. We should take it into our own hands. And there's some examples of this. For example, using government grants and government research, several big startups, very well-funded startups, have actually developed gene therapies to cure things like an inherited condition of blindness. And the problem with this is that many of them charge a huge amount of money. Like once they patent their solution, and then if you want to have that for your child or yourself, you have to pay a lot of money. It's almost like extortion. The prices are so high, they can run into the $100,000s or the millions of dollars. And imagine somebody who isn't insured for this, but their child is going blind and they need this. Where are they going to get the money? So Josiah Zayner and others like him have seen this happen in the marketplace. And they're like, no, they shouldn't have a monopoly on this technology. All of us should be able to administer it to ourselves. We're smart enough to do it. Well, he went ahead and in a live broadcast injected himself, basically editing his own genes in order to transform his body and build his muscle mass. There's no proof that it worked. In fact, it probably didn't work. And we still don't know what the long-term effects of this are. But Josiah Zayner set a really poor example of biohacking, extreme biohacking. If people start playing with this, people start doing this, the results could be catastrophic. It could seriously impair somebody's health and perhaps even somebody's life. So if you think it's risky to experiment with nootropics and smart drugs and inserting electronics into your body, gene editing is even riskier, like exponentially riskier. And, we have to grapple with this issue. Now, since he did that, Josiah Zayner said he made a mistake. He acted rashly. It wasn't something he should have done, and he shouldn't have done it, especially publicly, setting himself as an example. But I think it's something we can learn from. And it's something not isolated to one individual. People are taking this gene editing technology into their own hands. They're experimenting on animals, living organisms. They're experimenting on themselves. They have the potential to discover amazing things and to make great achievements. I mean, many of the scientists throughout history have experimented on themselves, but they also have the potential to unleash forces that they are unaware of and cause damage that could be severe to humanity and to other creatures inhabiting this planet. You can, for example, unleash a gene drive, which is a genetically programmed drive that actually transmits these changes in the gene from generation to generation. And it can lead to a species extinction or altering a species permanently, where you have permanently altered the gene pool on that. That is something that no human individual and no human company should do lightly without measuring without really understanding the potential damage that can be done. I mean, they're experimenting right now with gene drives in New Zealand. There's been these proposals bouncing back and forth because they have these invasive species, these rats that go around and are killing all the native bird eggs. They're eating the bird eggs and wiping out bird populations. So they're like, well, we could introduce a gene drive that would literally wipe out the rats, like kill them off in a few generations. Is that good? Well, it would be great for the birds, but what if this gene drive isn't contained to this invasive species of rats in New Zealand, and one of these rats jumps on a ship and gets to Australia, and then from Australia to China, and then eventually to America? All the rats in the world could be wiped out. This could be possible, and who are we to take this power into our hand to wipe out an entire species, whether it's rats and they're doing these gene drives on mosquitoes to wipe out malaria? What are the repercussions of this? You know, it's great to wipe out malaria through killing all the mosquitoes, but lots of animals, fish and other things, birds, feed off mosquitoes and other insects. What would happen to them once you took that food source away? So it's a very complicated issue, but with biohackers, they're experimenting on the human race. CRISPR kits. That is right. You can buy your own gene editing kit for $99 on the web. It's that cheap today. And in your house, you can start to edit genes, create new organisms, modify existing organisms. This is kind of cool. It's kind of amazing. You know, the cost is so low, the barrier to entry is so low that almost anybody can do it. And there's no license for this. You don't need a license. You can just go out and do it. And people are doing it. However, you have to understand that this technology is dangerous, like in the wrong hands, and in the hands of people who really don't know what they're doing and don't know the implications. Yet it has become so cheap and so readily available. What will this mean for our future? The future of humanity? Think about it. What if a terrorist gets a hold of these, reads some basic biology books and information on the web, and starts to understand how to unleash, new viral vectors into the world that modify humans' genes, kill people, cause disease, wreak havoc? What would this do? Well, so far, so good. Nothing bad has happened. And honestly, the biohacking communities around the world, they're, for the most part, very ethical. And they're really focused, mostly on, some of them are just hobbyists doing it as a hobby. Other people are doing it, self-experimentation for their own benefit and for their own curiosity, because they're curious and they want to see what will happen. And some of them have dreams of making history, discovering something great. So we haven't seen terrorist cells emerge using this technology. But that doesn't mean it won't happen, because the cost is so low and the information, the knowledge is out there, freely available on the internet. You don't need to go and get a PhD to start doing this. If you're smart, you can figure it out in your garage or your basement and set up a little lab and start creating strange plants and animals and doing all sorts of experiments, even on yourself and your family members. And I am sure there are people doing this today. So it's something that as a society, we need to grapple with. What do we do about the proliferation of low-cost technology that literally allows us to alter the course of life on this planet? Dangers and ethics. With the explosion of experimentation, of creativity, of knowledge on the internet and around the world, biohacking is really taking off. But with it comes risks, and with it comes ethical concerns that we as a society need to deal with. Now is the time. This really, what we've seen, the vanguard of biohackers that are out there now doing self-experimentation and experimenting on plants and animals and other things. We need to ask, should they be regulated? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? What are the ethical standards we should hold them to? Because honestly, they aren't just playing with themselves. They are playing with humanity. They are playing with all of us can be affected by the changes they unleash. Whether it's new viruses, new modified bacteria, doing gene drives that modify plant and animal species, modifying human beings. These all have implications, serious implications. So it's time for us as a society to put this on the table. Now, we don't want to stifle innovation, and we don't want to curb civil liberties. We want people to be free to go out and experiment and do stuff. Many of the greatest discoveries in the world were made by amateur scientists. They weren't from the big established universities. They didn't have medical degrees or PhDs. A lot of them were just really, really interested, like the biohackers today. So, do we allow them to do whatever they want? Or do we put some limits on them? And do we hold them to ethical standards? And how do we enforce these? Who reviews them? What bodies do we put in place? And it's not restricted to any one country or any one geography. People can unleash something around the world, halfway around the world, and it can spread quickly and affect all of us. So the world itself needs to open up this dialogue. And we need to decide where we're going and what we're doing and what should be done and what shouldn't be done. But honestly, even if we restrict people and even if we restrict companies, certain governments will do what they want. So this is coming, and it's something for all of us to think about. The future of humans. Are we going to be editing human beings? Will that become normal? Will having a variety of different branches, take our single species and we branch off into multiple species that are each experimenting on themselves and on each other. Is this our future? Will we, because of global warming, many species are dying out, and pollution and other things and climate change, all these things are impacting this world. Will we be inventing new species that can withstand these strains? And we're going to be going to other planets. And on these other planets, the environments are very harsh. Will we use biohacking techniques and gene editing to create species that can survive on these planets? These are all questions we have to answer. And they are all coming up faster than you would expect. Because this isn't a small movement, it's a big movement. It's like a steamroller, and it's coming our way. So we either have to just get out of the way and let it roll over what it does, or we have to figure out what we do with this steamroller. I hope you enjoyed the talk. If you liked it, you can come to founderspace.com. You can check out our latest events, contact us, and see my latest books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, and The 5 Forces. You can also find me on all the major social networks. Just search for Founderspace.